Welcome to the Leadership Passport. I'm very excited today to introduce my special guest, Mr. Rich Sheridan. Rich is the CEO, co-founder, and chief storyteller of Menlo Innovations, located in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Rich became disillusioned in the middle of his career in the chaotic technology industry. He had an all-consuming thought: things can be better, much better. Why couldn't a workplace filled with camaraderie, human energy, creativity, and productivity? Ultimately, Rich co-founded Menlo Innovations in 2001 to end human suffering in the workplace. His unique approach to custom software creation is so surprisingly different that 3,000 people a year travel from around the world just to see how they do it. His passion for creating joyful work environments also led to his best-selling books, Joy Inc. and Chief Joy Officer. Welcome, Rich.
Thanks. Great to be with you, Kevin. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here. Now, you shared with me a little bit earlier that you were invited to speak to a group of executives on Sir Richard Branson's Necker Island. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I've had a great, Menlo and I have had a great long-term relationship with the philanthropic part of a Virgin called Virgin Unite, and built a lot of great relationships there, gone to some of their events and so on. And he was gathering a group of executives for a retreat on Necker Island. And they called me up and said, Rich, we'd love you to be one of the speakers. And my simple question was, why on earth would I say no to this opportunity? And they said, we can't think of a reason. And so it was a delightful time. There was about a half a dozen of us invited to speak to this very high-powered group of executives. And but, probably the best part was you got to hang out on Necker Island. You got to be at events with Richard Branson, and it was just delightful.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So before we get into some, I guess, more proper questions, if your leadership style was a song or a movie, what would it be and why?
A lot of times when I step up onto a stage to give a keynote, they put Farrell's Happy song on there. And maybe if we could even go back a little bit further in time and do the Don't Worry, Be Happy sign. I think my team, if they added one more title to CEO and Chief Storyteller, they'd probably add Chief Optimist. And it's kind of an attitude I bring with me every day, is that, uh, you know, optimism isn't the ignoring all the negative and real things that go on around you, but it's simply an attitude and spirit that says we can work through this together.
So talking a little bit now about Menlo Innovations and, I guess, joyful culture in its entirety, what does a joyful day at Menlo look like from your perspective, if you can paint us a bit of a picture?
Yeah. Number one, the space itself is part of our culture. And it's always been the same, even though we've had 4 buildings since our founding in 2001. It's a wide open room. It's pull downs from the ceiling, so the tables can be put anywhere you want. So there's a little bit of we'll call it a little bit of a kindergarten feel to Menlo. There's a playfulness to the space itself, and there's a great flexibility to it. And there's kind of an evenness about the space in the sense that everybody has the same kind of setup, including me and my co-founder. We're sitting out in the room with everybody else. There's no gifted C-suite for the founders. We are out in the room. And because, as I'm sure we'll talk about, we work in pairs at Menlo, people are always in conversation. So these visitors that we get by the thousands every year, if I happen to walk into the space with them, if this is the first time they've seen it, I'm right there. I can almost guarantee the first sound out of their mouths is, wow. Because you can actually feel the palpable human energy in the room of people in conversation, working together, talking to one another. There's laughter here. There's an occasional dog in the space, maybe even a baby. We can talk about those things as well. But it's all geared around this idea that if we can keep human energy high, we can conquer a lot of hard problems, which is what we do for a living in general, as we design and develop custom software for our business clients. And but you can feel it, you can actually sense it. And for me, I've been coming here obviously since the founding day. And it's 24 years of getting that feeling every time I walk in the room.
Right. And you mentioned before it has maybe a bit of a kindergarten style feel to it at first glance. What would a Menlo style school look like, do you think? If we were to give you the keys to a school for a year, where might you start?
A lot of things on the walls. So not just active, well, there's posters that evoke some of our core values, funny sayings about business or life or culture or design. And those are high up on the wall as a reminder to us every day. Why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? But lower down, there's these colorful displays, almost like bulletin board displays that you would see in a school, which actually define the assignments for these pairs of people working together. And they note their progress with little colorful circle sticky dots. Yellow says that's the task they're working on right now. Orange says they think they're done and somebody should come and check my work. Green says your work got checked and it was good to go. Red says your work got checked and there's a problem and you need to go back and fix it. And here's the problem on a Post-it note that was stuck to the same cards. Again, when people walk in, they're kind of shocked because here's a tech firm that builds software for a living, and we use yarn, push pins, and sticky dots to define our projects and our plans and our progress on those plans. And people ask us about that, and we say, we choose the tools that work better for humans, and humans engage better with physical artifacts. And and I think that to me it evokes that feeling of kindergarten or first grade. I used to say our project managers would be a really good fourth grade school teacher for because they're just used to organizing the efforts in a bulletin board fashion.
Yeah. And I think in one of your books, you talk a little bit about banishing fear or get rid of fear from the workplace. Schools can have a bit of fear
Mm-hmm.
within them, either fear of inspection, evaluation, failure, or burnout, parent demands, and so on. But what advice might you have for school leaders to start working through that or removing that from their culture?
Yeah, we do get a lot of school leaders who come and visit here, which is kind of fun. And I will tell you, there have been more than one of them as they're leaving. They plead with me and say, please tell the world this is what school should look like. And I think here's what I believe they see, and it's evoked by our core values. We have three key core values here at Menlo. One is help others succeed. And so if you're coming in every day thinking, how can I help others succeed? And the others might be our customers. The others might be the users of the software that we're designing and developing. But most importantly is their peers on the team. How do I make sure the person sitting next to me has the best chance for succeeding? That simple idea of helping others succeed pumps a lot of fear out of the room. Because I will say, in a lot of the corporate environments I was in for a long time, it was the opposite of that. Help others fail so you can look better and you'll succeed and climb the corporate business ladder. And that creates a tremendous amount of fear in the organization. And it's self-induced fear. It's not productive fear. It is literally simply trying to create this hyper competitive environment where we're going to cut the lowest 10% every year and all that kind of crazy stuff that corporations do. And now people start lying about what progress they've made. They start bad mouthing their peers in a corner and that sort of thing. And we just don't want that here. So that's one of our key core values. Another one is run the experiment. So that idea is we should be learning all the time, and we should be willing. And we have a poster here that says, it's okay to say, I don't know. Now think about that in a corporate environment or even a school environment. If we're teaching people, you should know these things. Well, really? What if I don't? What if I forgot? What if I don't quite remember it right? What if I just haven't learned that yet? It should be okay to say, I don't know. And too often in society, we're trying to drill that out of people. Oh no, if you don't know, pretend you do. There's a lot of fear in that. But this idea of running the experiment is the idea of taking action versus taking a meeting. That if you have an idea, rather than people discounting it or saying, well, I'm not sure that would work, or we've never tried that before, I'm not sure that'll work here. The response is, well, I know, but why don't we try it? See if it works. Let's run the experiment. And for us, the word experiment is such a disarming word, because let's say it doesn't work. Let's say you did have what you thought was a good idea, but didn't work. Well, afterwards you can say, yeah, I know, but it was just an experiment. We tried something and we learned something from it and didn't work. And then the third core value is make mistakes faster, which is, again, kind of antithetical to how corporations work and often how schools work. We want to get the best grades. We want to get into the best colleges. We want to get the best test scores, all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure how much learning there is in that kind of environment. I think we can end up in a place where we're being safe all the time. We're only learning the things that we know we're able to learn. Whereas the idea of make mistakes faster is this acknowledgement we're human. We're going to make mistakes. Why don't we make small, quick to correct mistakes rather than really big, slow, expensive, dangerous mistakes?
Mm. So, taking that a few steps further, you're talking about sort of values and philosophical underpinnings of some of your approaches. What's something that you used to believe as a leader that now you completely reject?
I used to believe I was the boss, that the boss knew everything, that my job was to make sure everybody was on track and that I knew what everybody was doing, and that, if I didn't, that was a failure on my part, or somebody was skirting around the system and doing something they weren't supposed to be doing. And honestly, I think the attitude that developed inside of me was that my job was to be the smartest guy in the room. And the trouble is, that's a hero-based organization, and the only way to scale heroes is overtime. And I remember a particular moment with my 8-year-old daughter who I'd taken to work that day on a take your child to work day program at their school. And at the end of a day, I asked her what she thought of watching a VP work all day. This is back in my old job. And she said, well, you're really important here, Dad. I'm like, what? What do you mean? What did you see? Because I'm thinking, what more boring day for an 8-year-old than to watch a VP work all day? Like, oh, I can't wait to get into the work world. My dad does email all day long in meetings. But she saw something else. And quite frankly, she was proud of what she saw. She said, nobody here can make a decision without asking you first. I was instantly mortified. And she was right. She saw it as clear as day. I was the pinnacle. I was the guy you had to come to ask permission. I was the guy that was the gatekeeper for all decisions that were going to be made, and they all had to flow through me. Well, guess what? Then the organization can't move faster than me. And this is where it dawned on me, no, let go, Rich. Let go of the vine. Let the people lead. Be their coach, be their advisor, be their servant leader. And so that was a big thing I had to let go of. That was the change I had to personally make inside my heart and inside my mind in terms of how to lead people.
So, I'm wondering, how do you tend to your team culture when you sense that things might be starting to slip a bit, or perhaps not necessarily, reverting back to the way things were, or people reverting to, a sense of comfort in how they've worked in the past? How do you course correct those types of things?
Yeah, one thing I always tell people, because, they hear about joy and they equate it to happiness and all that kind of stuff, is I said, let's be clear. These are regular human beings here. They all got stuff going on in their personal lives and their personal history, stuff going on at home, going on at work. So we have to recognize that there's no perfection here. at all. And I think that's an important acknowledgement, is that, you're going to see stuff here, something's going to happen, and you're like, ooh, that didn't feel quite right. One of the things we've taught the team to do in those circumstances is to ask their pair partner if that's where the conflict is, because there is conflict here, or the person there, just simply look at them and say, are you okay? And what we try and do there is teach the team, okay, you just had some difficult interaction with another team member. Before you check in on the problem, check in with the human, because it might be there's stuff you thought was personal that has nothing to do with you. It might have been they took their dog into the vet that morning and got some bad news, a bad diagnosis, and now they're just weighed down with that. And by checking in with the human first, you might learn something that you wished you knew before you lit into them, something that was causing you concern. And the other thing is just to speak into it, speak into it with kindness and gentleness, inquisitiveness. And we love books, and we have learned a lot from authors. So one of the books that we really admire is by what used to be called Vital Smarts, now called Crucial Learning. And they have this wonderful book called Crucial Conversations. And there's so many wonderful axioms in there that you can use in those difficult situations, because quite frankly, that's where you want to get the culture back on track rather than just run it under the carpet and ignore it. You want to make sure you're dealing with it. And again, we won't be perfect in that either. And that's why having a bunch of people around can really help, because if you don't deal with it, maybe somebody else will encourage you to. I could tell you a personal story about that for me. But for example, in Crucial Conversations, they have this phrase called master your story. And what happens is when something goes wrong, if you do something to offend me, I create a story in my head about you. And guess what? It's probably wrong, right? And so often when you're trying this particular concept out on someone, you reveal it. Say, hey, Kevin, that thing happened yesterday. I'd like to talk to you about it. The story in my head is to reveal what am I thinking? Just put it out there on the table. I might be accurate, I might not be, but you don't know which shadow you're fighting against if I'm got this story running in my head and we're having a difficult interaction about an important topic. And and so those kind of things we try and incorporate in our conversations.
Mm. And is there a particular non-negotiable when it comes to you for leadership? So the thing that you hold firmly onto no matter what?
I think if there is, if there's this moment of, call it verbal violence or something like that, if there's a point where you can't let go of something, if you can't open yourself up to be vulnerable, I would say those are probably the places where it's just, not going to work here. And, and again, we do let people go from time to time. And if we make the decision, it's probably around something like that. But we always have a lot of conversations about it. It's something to work through, make sure there wasn't some other external factor that maybe was causing some trouble that we should, and again, people are free to share as much or as little as they want about what might be going on out in the world or at home or something like that. And you don't want to force that. But on the other hand, you also want to give them a little bit of grace and say, is there something going on in your life that you want to share with us that would let us know that this is probably you're not going to be your best self on a given day.
Mm. Mm. If we talk about motivation a little bit, I know you talk about in terms of financial aspects are not always the most motivating for employees. What do you think most leaders get wrong about motivation?
Yeah, I think financial once you're at a fairness point, right? If people feel like they're being fairly treated financially, that they're not the best paid, they're not the worst paid, but they feel like you're treating them fairly. Once you get past that, I don't think money can make any difference at all. In fact, I think often it goes in the opposite direction. What leaders get wrong is they're trying to evoke some, the popular term is KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. And the trouble is you often get what you measure, right? And if you're measuring the wrong things, you'll get that behavior. I remember when one of our team members decided to go take another job somewhere else they were interviewing. They were very open about it, just telling us what they were looking for, and it made sense. But she went to interview at one company, and she was going to be in a leadership position. And they said, "So what are your key KPIs for your team members?" And as soon as they asked that question, the switch went from one side to the other. And she's like, "Well, I'm not going to be working here." And I don't know what she said as an answer, but she'd already made the decision at that point that this isn't going to be the place for her. Because, motivation comes from, I think, a really deep place of serving others. I think that's generally what feeds us as human beings, is that, uh, we have a phrase here about joy. When we talk about joy, which is a big word here, we talk about joy as it connects to our purpose, and that every company's purpose should be able to ask and answer two pretty simple questions to say, not always as easy to answer as you would think, but the questions are, who do you serve? And what would delight look like for them? And when you, through the work of your heart, your hands, your mind, your team, your processes, your culture, when you delight others with what you do, and I'm imagining you see this in a school all the time. If you walk in a classroom and you see kids on fire for learning, walking out the door, clicking their heels because they just, they've made some big breakthrough in their own mind, that is joy for you, right? And it's joy for that teacher, and it's joy for the students. And that's the same thing here. When we hear back from customers, we've designed and developed software, and they come back to us and they say, software. Most people don't say that about software. Most people do not say, I love this software, right? They're like, oh, I'll learn it. I'll get along with it. It's okay. I don't know why it works like this when it should work like that. But when they come back and say, I love this, you made my life better because of what you did, that's where joy comes from for us.
Fantastic. What would you say to a teacher or a principal who might be listening to this and thinks, well, this all sounds great, but we don't have time for that, or you know, it seems like this insurmountable thing to, because perhaps it's just so different from their current experience.
I tell a lot of stories, chief storyteller. So I'm going to share a story that I use on this exact point with audiences around the world. And it's when we think about leaders, and teachers are leaders, principals are leaders, right? Often we think of top leaders, right? Presidents and of nations that can call the nation to the moon and safely back, or something like that. And I always tell people that leadership, the kind of leadership we actually need in the world, can occur anywhere. It can occur, at the front lines, right? Which is where teachers often find themselves. And so I tell this story of a McDonald's at Detroit Metro Airport, where I walk into the McDonald's, and every time I'm there, there's this guy named Mike. And he's an older guy, and I know his name is Mike because that's what his badge says, his McDonald's badge. And he was hustling around that restaurant every time I saw him. And anytime Mike would get near me, he'd lean in and he'd say, how's it going? Have a safe flight. Can I get you anything? Can I get you a napkin? Every time I was there, Mike did that. I was blown away. I thought, they are so lucky to have Mike. Where do they get a guy with this energy? This is incredible, right? And then one time I'm there and Mike's off shift. And this young kid is pulling a sled full of garbage out of the back of the restaurant. And he gets by my table, he leans in, he goes, how's it going? Have a safe flight. Can I get you anything? Can I get you a napkin? And I'm like, I thought, what on earth is going on at this McDonald's? So I found Derek, the manager, and I thanked him because I was noticing this, and I said, I just got to say thank you. You made, you're making a difference in my day here with your team. And he thanked me for noticing. He said, Rich, we're in a highly competitive environment here. Anything we can do to, maybe beat the restaurant across the way or something like that, we're going to try. And here's the beautiful part. It was free. I never even asked for a napkin, right? And I'm pretty sure Derek didn't go to McDonald's corporate and say, hey guys, could you form a committee to write a policy on doling out kindness and napkins? No, he just did it, right? He didn't ask for permission. And this isn't like something like if you got, what are you get in trouble for saying, have a nice day? But the point is, and the big point here, and this is the message to your teachers is, I get it. The world is crazy. There's stuff going on in your school and the school system and the world that you feel like you're up against everything. But this story points out something very important. You don't have to change the world. You just have to change your world. I get it. There's a lot of stuff going on out there that weighs us down. But when you're in that classroom with those kids, you can create the environment that works exactly the way you want to generate the best learning environment you can. And you are in control of that. And I often talk about the fact that one of the best things under our control is our own attitude when we walk into the door that morning. Carrying in just that slight positive attitude, walking in the door, is infectious to everybody. And what's beautiful about it, and I know your teachers know this, and your best teachers really know this, later on when the next classes are coming, the parents are doing what parents always do. They're asking the parents of the older students, who are the best teachers, right? And then parents start angling in their clever ways. I think Mrs. Smith's teaching style is really consistent with my child's learning style. No, they're just like, I'm hearing all the kids love being in Mrs. Smith's class. I want my kid in Mrs. Smith's class. Why? Because there's something she's doing. She's carrying in that positive attitude, that spirit, that energy. It's me, it could feel a little bit like you against the world at times, but when you're in that room, that's your place. That's your place to lead it the way you think is best. And I've seen plenty of examples in schools, and I know this is almost heresy to say this. You don't need to teach to the test. If you're teaching good stuff, the tests will take care of themselves.
100%. I couldn't agree more. So, reflecting on those couple of stories that you shared. So, how do you handle a bad day? So, when joy is sort of built into what you do and your workplace and everything else, like how do you show up authentically in that way when some days you're just not feeling it?
Yeah, and that certainly happens. And I will say that I do have a prayer life, so that helps. Sometimes just stepping back and, sort of talking to your maker, and reminding yourself of, what's really important and asking for help in that way. And I think that's a key thing in general with other humans is I am wired to, when something I'm struggling with, I I will, because I'm an engineer. I'll try and fix it. I'll try and solve it. But I will also. I've surrounded myself with a lot of good people who help me when I'm struggling, and just say, "Hey, I need a few minutes. Can we just talk? Can I share with you what's on my heart?" And that sort of thing. And that just helps a tremendous amount. They have that social circle of really just, my kids laugh at me about this because I'll often say, oh, Kevin, he's one of my best friends, and it'll be like, really, Dad? Like, how many best friends do you have? And what's your definition? I need a definition for best friend because you seem to have a lot of them. And I said, well, my simple definition is this. If I'm in trouble in three in the morning for whatever reason, and I call Kevin on his cell phone and say, Kevin, I'm at this corner. I need your help. Can you come get me? And he says, no problem, Rich. I'll be there in a minute. And he gets in his car, drives. He said, that's a best friend. And, and obviously I don't get in trouble on street corners at 3 a.m. That's not my style. I'm always asleep. But I think mentally when we're in trouble, who do we have to call to just say, hey, can I talk with you about this?
Yeah, fantastic. All right, a couple of questions to wrap things up now. What's one thing that you hope a school leader listening today might do differently tomorrow after hearing this conversation?
I think all of us got into a profession for a reason, and we often end up forgetting that reason, right? Because life happens the way it does, and then it just becomes that, oh, I'm going to work and dreading the drive and all that kind of stuff. And I would just say what I would encourage your teachers to do is do some self-reflection. Did I get into this profession in the first place? What drew me? My guess is for most teachers, because we all had them, most of us decided to become a teacher because of some teacher in their lives. And what's interesting to me is, I can remember Miss Decay and Mrs. Phelan and Mr. McElhenney and Mr. Wojcik and I remember different things about them, and Miss Crapel and and Mr. Whites. If it wasn't for Mr. Whites, I probably wouldn't be here with you today. That one singular teacher made all the difference in my life for the profession I chose. And so, so I would just say, try and be that teacher for your kids. Now, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but let me also give you the negative story, just in case it's helpful. There was a time in 8th grade where my teacher at the time came up to me. It was a social studies class. And I don't know why she was asking me this question, but she said, Rich, what do you think you want to be when you grow up? And I answered like that. I said, airline pilot. And the next words out of a teacher's mouth in that moment could be so important. And her answer to me was, well, we don't often end up being what we thought we wanted to be at this age. And I'm like, don't do that, please. Think of all the responses she could have had at that moment. She'd be like, oh, that's really interesting. Have you done any research on that? Hey, let's go find some stuff that can help you learn what it takes to be an airline pilot. What would you have to study? What would you have to know? All that kind of stuff. But she's like, oh, no, you probably won't be that. Think of something else. Now, good news, I ended up going and getting a private pilot's license, so I still learned how to fly an airplane. But it was the next year where Mr. White's got me on my path to computer science that I never looked back after that. So, tale of two cities. 8th grade, I got that response. 9th grade, I had the best teacher ever, and it just cast me in the right direction. So, be Mr. White's.
Amazing. Definitely. If you could add one invisible subject or maybe visible subject to any school curriculum, so something you think would best prepare students for life or leadership after they left school, what might that be?
Well, I might not answer it exactly the way you're asking it, but I have said this many times. If we can teach our kids 3 basic things, I think the world would be a better place. Number 1, how to manage their money. Number 2, how to express an idea to a group of people who don't know what you know. The ability to get up in front of a group and share an idea with them, something you know deeply, but the ability to communicate that to people who don't know what you know and able to actually pass it along, not lord over your knowledge, but just bring them along. And number 3, how to have an important discussion with another human being when you're in conflict, to actually work through that challenge. If we could teach those 3 basic skills, the world would be a better place. Imagine if we just taught it here in the United States to everybody in Congress: how to manage your money, how to communicate ideas effectively, and how to deal with conflict with a person you don't agree with. Wouldn't the world be a better place?
Amazing. That makes me think, just a little bit off topic now. A couple of years ago, when I was a middle school principal, we surveyed our grade 8 students about what they wish we would be teaching them or helping them to learn more about. And those 3 things were the top 3 things. They said,
Wow.
we want to communicate better. We're really rubbish at, like, we get in lots of fights and arguments. We don't know how to resolve our conflicts, and we want to learn more about money and what it means and what we do with it and how to be responsible with it. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, I'll just say one more thing, just because I learned this from a teacher at a Vital Smarts conference. They have an annual conference every year. And she heard my talk and she came up. She goes, Rich, I have this great idea. We use this in our kindergarten class. She said, it's called a solution circle. And she said, have you ever heard of it? I said, no, I've never heard of it. And she says, well, there's a circle and there's two chairs. And when the kids get in conflict, their statement one to the other is, can we go work this out in the solution circle? And they sit down in the chairs facing each other, and they have a pre-programmed startup to this, which is the one kid who felt offended said, hey, when you grabbed the crayons out of my hands, it made me feel really bad because I was just about to finish the picture I was working on and I really needed those crayons. And the other kid's pre-programmed response is, I'm really sorry I made you feel that way. What could I have done differently in that moment so that I didn't hurt your feelings? And just think how many things we could work through as human beings if we just start there. Describe what the condition was that made me feel, apologize, and then ask, what could I have done differently? I just thought, what a mind-blowing, example of basic, simple human communication through conflict.
At a kindergarten level. Amazing. You were talking before about you and your team, books, reading, authors. What's your favorite book on leadership?
Yeah, Leadership and Self-Deception, coupled with The Anatomy of Peace, are two books by the Arbor Institute, and they're mind-blowing books. And then they are like fables, like a Patrick Lencioni book. They're fictional stories, but really work through a lot of really things that everyone can identify with. And then the follow-on book to those tells what's going on inside the stories, and it's called The Outward Mindset. And basically, it's the idea that others matter as much as I do.
Fantastic. One thing that you do daily that helps you to lead better?
I try and get out in nature, that's experience that awe of nature. And, just because what's going to help me lead better is to calm the noise in my head, the chatter in my brain. And that's one way to do that.
Right. And finally, best advice you've ever received?
Yeah, I had a boss once who said to me, he said, and it was at this moment of like, I was starting down a path of leadership, and he pulled me aside and he says, Rich, I just want to remind you, I don't need the best job you can do. I need the best job we all can do together. And it's your job to help lead in a way that gets the best from everybody around you.
Amazing. All right. Well, that's it. Thanks so much for joining me today, Rich. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I did as well, Kevin. Thank you for reaching out to me.
Great. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, etc. Drop a comment below to let me know anything you'd like covered in upcoming episodes or suggestions for future guests. You can also connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn.